This conference will
Okay.
now be recorded.
Okay, cool. So welcome everyone to the FOREVER software training. RJ Rickert here with ISW, the master distributor for the Oki data transfer printers, as well as FOREVER paper, Nina paper, Magic Touch paper, a lot of stuff in the personalization world. Today I'm going to go through the FOREVER TransferRIP in depth, steps 1 through 5. What I would like to do, just to make sure we get everyone's questions answered, is if you do have a question, please type it, just so I can see it, and then I'll probably stop, read the questions that I do have, and I'll unmute people so we can have dialogue as well. But if we can get all the questions in the chat, it's going to help us log those questions, so we can make a nice FAQ sheet that I'll be able to post, following the webinar as well. So here is the FOREVER TransferRIP. This is step 1. So whether you have it, you don't have it, this is where you upload your profiles for your exact printer. So whether you have the 8432, the 711, or the 9541, or the 920, here are set profiles that, if you're using laser dark, you're going to select the laser dark. If you're using laser light, you'll select the laser light. And if you're using multi-trans or a hard surface paper, you'll select that as well. And what those are, they're basically set profiles for you with the RIP. So when you get to step 5, your media settings are already changed for you. That's pretty much the only thing that it changes, is that it's telling the RIP software that I'm printing on a film or a heavier, laser light paper, or a multi-trans or, a more heavier paper as well. So I'm going to, just for today's sake, act like I have the 8432 in laser dark, but all these settings will go for if you have any of these other printers as well. So all you're going to do is select the profile that you're wanting, and you're going to come down here and you're going to hit select. If you don't have the RIP yet, all you'd have to do is import, and the CD disk that the RIP software comes with has all the profiles for your printer already there. So you'll just hit import, you'll go to the CD disk, and you'll go ahead and upload those profiles right here. And then that's how you'll get started. So I'm going to hit select, and that's going to take us to step 2 of the RIP, which is where you load in your images. So first and foremost, a couple things to note is that this is a section where you want your USB dongle plugged in. So when you're uploading images, so if I hit load an image and I select, a certain image, and you upload it without your USB dongle in or connected to your computer, you are going to see grid lines here on your image. So I would actually see, grid lines up and down over here on your bottom left. And basically all that's telling you is that, hey, your car keys to your cars aren't plugged into your car. So it's basically the same thing as that, hey, your USB dongle is not inserted in your computer when you uploaded that RIP. So all you would have to do to fix that is you would delete your image, plug in your USB dongle, and then re-upload that image to make sure those grid lines are not there. The second biggest thing to know is, what paper size are you using? So, for instance, if you see down here, I was using A4. But if I go to a couple of these other jobs, I was using 8.5 by 11. So I would come over here and make sure I have my letter selected before I upload my image into the RIP. The same thing goes for 11 by 17. So if I have 11 by 17 size image, making sure I select my tabloid down here before I go ahead and load my image into the RIP, just so the RIP software and your paper size are both on the same page, or else you'll see, maybe it's only printing on half the sheet or something like that. Is that you want to make sure that whatever size image you are using matches the size of paper that you're using as well. Other than that, as you can see here, we're just using PDF, PNG files, PSD files. It'll take JPEGs. It'll pretty much take anything you want, EPS files. A quick note, if you do realize that you have an X over here when you load in an image, that's basically the RIP software saying it doesn't like the file type that you're using. So my recommendation is always to go back to your design software. Sometimes it's tricky. It doesn't happen often, but just say you loaded a PDF and you get an X here. when you normally should have a checkpoint, is go back in that design software, maybe save it as a PNG file, and then re-upload it in the RIP. Like I said, it happens rarely, but it does happen. It's just basically the RIP software saying, hey, I don't like the file type that you're using. Please, save it as something else. So, like I said, you change PDF, PNG, or something of that nature, and then re-upload in the RIP, and that should fix that issue. But other than that, that's step 2. This is basically where you're just going to be loading in your software, or your images to use. So once you have your image, all you're going to do is select it down here, and you're going to load in your image. So for step 3, let me go ahead and start with this image right here. So this is step 3 of the RIP, and this is going to be your color management. As you can see up here, this is where you're going to be able to delete colors. You're going to be able to change colors, add saturation, stuff of that sort. So first and foremost, at step 3, I always like to go down here to the substrate color and change it to anything other than white. So you can always change it to whatever shirt color you're going on to. So if we're going on a black shirt, I'll go ahead and select that for my substrate color. So now you actually know a couple things. 1, how it's going to look on the t-shirt. And 2, if I would change the background to black, but it stays white, that right there is telling me that my file still has a white background behind it, and that will actually print that white background as well. So this is a good, little tip that you can use, is that always change your substrate color, because if you change it and it stays white, that means you got to go back in your design software and just remove the background of that image or save it as a transparent. So secondly, what I like to do, or we'll just go into how do I change a color, or get the exact color I want. So that's up here on selective color correction, and all you got to do is hit the add button, or right here with the plus sign, and go ahead and move this over to the side and select your source color. So this blue right here, if I click on it, as you see here, is 100% cyan. Well, maybe the color you want is 100% cyan and 15 yellow. Well, you can go in this destination color here and type in the exact output that you're looking for. And then your color adjustment, it always starts, right here. It's just basically your tolerance level. How much of that color do you want to change? And it comes stock on 3. I always recommend, if you're wanting to change the color, is to make it at least 10. So I always just add a 1 in front of it, and then you'll hit save. And what the RIP's going to do is it's going to change that blue here, and you'll see it here, to the specific color that you are looking to change. So now if I wanted to easily say, I want this blue to be this red down here, so I'm going to take my source color, click on the color, and then on my destination color, I'm going to click over here and then click on the red. So I'm telling the RIP right now, I want this blue to be this red, and then hit save. You can easily do that in the RIP. The only tricky thing is when you're trying to, and you can always delete these, so by clicking on this here, and then just hitting delete. The tricky thing is when you get to like oranges and yellows, because some of these both have, the orange has magenta in it, and yellow's got a little magenta in it as well. So sometimes if you're trying to change colors to different color outputs, but they're similar colors, it will change more of it. So a lot of the times, if you are looking to make color correction changes, I would do that ahead of time in your design software. But you can simply do it here. You can also remove colors. So if I go down to remove, all you're going to do is click on the color you want to remove, hit save, and then it's a tolerance thing. So, if I start at 1, see if it removes the color, and it did not. So you're going to have, this one, you got to play with it. So if we go up to 5, still didn't. I noticed that once you get above 7, that's when it really, deletes that tolerance. So you see it's removing some of it, but if you get too high here, like I was saying earlier, it's going to delete everything that, is kind of similar to that color. So yes, you can delete colors, and you can delete, black backgrounds here, but it does pull, any color that's going to look like that. So you see that 8 got rid of the red, but also got rid of that orange. So like I said, if you're looking to delete a color, a lot of the times in this software, it's just better to do that ahead of time before you load it into the RIP. So some tips and tricks that I like to do on step 3 is I always like to bump up saturation, and I'll show you what that does. Bumping up the saturation, wait for it to log in. Let me select a different image for this. It just helps bring the colors out. So you could start here, and this is going to be completely fine. But, if you want to get skin tones, or you want the greens and the blues and the lighter colors to be more vibrant, is I always recommend bumping up your saturation to 5 or 10. And you can see, the colors are really starting to pop. So I don't like to get too far over 10, 15 sometimes, because if you go too high, you really change the colors that you're trying to, perpetuate onto the t-shirt itself. So, with that being said, I always like to go 5 or 10 because I think that helps bring out the colors of the image better, and make them really stand out on that t-shirt. As far as any other of these settings, yes, you can always play with it. Adding more cyan to the image, you can do that. I just don't find these very helpful. Me personally, I never use anything other than saturation. If you think your image is a little too dark and you want to brighten it up, if you brighten it up, you're going to see here that it kind of fades out the image, and you're not going to get the vibrancy that you're looking for. And then contrast, it can play a role, but I think it takes too much of the color away as well, as you can see here. So yes, there are different settings to use, but this is personally just me. I always just go to saturation and bump that from about 5 to 10, like I said. So now I'm going to take just a couple seconds here and answer some questions. So Carrie says, is there a limit to how many designs you can keep loading the RIP? So that goes back to step 2, and I'm going to say no. If you see here, I have images that I have uploaded since 2018. I do not believe there's a limit to as many images as you can. So that's the nice thing is that, once you upload your design, if you don't delete it, it's going to stay there. So maybe it's a reoccurring customer that's always coming back for maybe a company logo or something like that. You can easily, come down here and find that job that you did in the past. Meredith says, what saturation level do you recommend for an all-white transfer? An all-white transfer, there is no need to do a saturation. I don't think it has any effect on white. And I'm trying to think, I believe I have an all-white design here. I might not, but this second one, it got white in it. So here's when you first are loading in the image and you select it, you're going to see the green over here go. This is just your loading. So as long as you see this green green bar, going up and down, that's just telling you that the RIP software is thinking and it's working. But just to answer that question, I'll kind of show you what the white does. But to answer your question, I don't ever recommend an all-white image. You don't really need to use that saturation. And I think this is taking a little bit longer to load because we're doing this webinar, and I just think my computer is going a little slow. So this will be a good example of removing color. So if I didn't want this background here, I could go to remove color, select the background, and then I can go ahead and remove that black background. Say I'm going on a black shirt. It's like you can do that here. So this is where, you know, tolerance is going to, you know, play a factor, is that how much of that image do you want to take out? And you can play with that here. There's also a step in step 5 that I'll get to later that, you know, there's a step that'll do it for you, but, you know, there's still a way that you can remove that here. So as you can see, David Beckham, you know, it's a black and white image. If you do your saturation, there's really not too much effect. If anything, it changes the color too much. So that's why if you are doing white, I would just keep that at 0 just to make sure your white is white. Okay, let's go back to that other design. Okay, so this is step 3. So I just want to make sure that if anyone has any more questions on step 3, I answer those before we move on. So I'm going to actually just go ahead and unmute everyone in case someone has one to ask over the telephone. Okay, cool. Let's go ahead and move on then. I'll keep the chat ready. All right, so this is step 3. So step 4, you change this how it comes. This is how step 4 works. This is all your white, and this is pretty much the main reason why you're printing through a RIP software, is for, you know, being able to control how much white you're laying down per print and why it's saving you money. So Oki Data is a printer manufacturer. Obviously, at the end of the day, they want to sell a lot of consumables, toners, drums of that sort. So printing it through the print driver, the Oki print driver prints a 300% coverage. So as you can see here, it's going to lay down white behind every single color. No matter what you choose, it's just going to lay it down. So the nice thing about the RIP is that, you know, Forever said, you know, we don't need that much white for our A and B sheets to marry each other, or for, you know, our one-step laser light paper to adhere to the t-shirt, and you actually only need 150%. So if you see here is that we're only laying white down behind the light blue and behind the yellow, but we're not going to, you know, lay white behind the orange and the red, because those are dense enough colors to where they don't need the additional white for it to be a successful print. So that's this coverage. So maybe the only time I ever change this is that maybe you're going on a polyester shirt and you want a little bit more white behind your colors to make sure there is no dye migration or something like that. You could bump it up to 200 to add a little bit more white. But I would say for the most part, you don't need to go above 150% for it to be a successful transfer, whether you're going on a polyester or a cotton shirt. Here's where, say you just want to print black, or you don't want to print any white at all, but you can turn off the white by doing the no spot channel, and it won't print any white behind any colors. So next is this multiplicate spot buy, and it says a factor of 1. This right here is a feature that basically says, hey, I want to add more white behind, you know, the light blue and the yellow, but I don't want to add more white behind, you know, my darker colors. Well, if you go from 1 to 2, you see here that you add more white behind your lighter colors. So maybe you want the yellow and the blue to maybe be a little more bright on the t-shirt, is that you can use this spot factor of really strategically picking where you're going to add more white. And like you see here, it doesn't add any more to the darker colors. So this is a pretty cool feature. I do use this feature a lot when I go on to polyester items, because, you know, obviously if you're going on a dark shirt and you have a lighter color, that's, you know, sometimes you can see some bleeding. So maybe if I'm going on 100% black t-shirt, I will bump up the factor to 2 before I print. But like I said, those are just personal preferences. It's a cool feature to have because it still does keep your darker colors, you know, dark. And so now we get into our choke features. And these two right here are going to be big features for you to use always. Your underfilling is your white choke. So you can go to 1 device pixel and 5 device pixels. And it doesn't show it here, so I do have some pictures to show you what those do. So we'll drag this over here. 1 device pixel, if you see here and we zoom in, we are choking the white back 1 device pixel from the edge. And if you're still seeing a little bit of bleeding on the outside of white, you can go all the way up to 5 device pixels, which will look like this. So there's a difference between 1 and 5. It's just the amount of choke you're coming from the edge and how much white you're choking back from the image. For a standard, what I always say normally works, every single time is I always set my underfilling to 2 just to make sure you get no bleeding. And then another huge step of the RIP is making sure you preserve your partial transparency. And there's 2 reasons why. One, a distressed design like this, when you do click it, you can see how much more crisp it makes that image. And that's going to choke in and make sure you get every little, distressed look you want to get out of this image. So if you see here, if it's not checked, you can see more of the border. And if you do check it, like I said, it's another just choke feature that you do want to use. So for those of you on the call right now, this would be, your standard of how your step 4 should always look in your RIP software. 150% coverage, spot factor of 1, underfilling of 2, and always checking preserve partial transparency. So this should be your baseline. And like I said, you can always make little changes here, but these 2 bottom features are going to be huge, especially if you're seeing, some outlines on your images and stuff like that. These are 2 big ones to do. With that being said, if there is any, transparencies in your image, let me go. So an image like this, you can see here that there's some transparencies here. So this is where it's going to be very important, is that if you don't check it, the RIP software sees toner. So if I did not check my preserve partial transparency, it's just going to print white. So being able to check that is how you can choke back that white and you get your true transparency that you are looking for on your design. So that's why this is a huge step to make sure you're always checking the box. So I see some more questions. So let me get loaded back up. So Kyle goes, I've noticed that your thicker garments like sweatshirts have a little dye migration, so bumping coverage for those can help if you start to see that. Yep, that is very true. But a lot of the sweatshirts out there, thicker material, and a lot of them are like a tri-blend material. So that's when you can, either increase your factor or even your coverage when you're going on the thicker materials. That is correct. Gerald goes, when I print white, it hasn't been pressing well. When I replace white with gray or another color, prints perfect. Do I need to add more white for white colors? That's a very good question. So technically, you can only get 100% of white in the RIP. So I can put this, as high as you want to, but if it's an all white, let me just go back here where this has some white text on it. So like down here is just 100% white, so is California. If I add white here, it's not going to add any white to your white because it's already 100% white. So what you can do on your printer itself, if you're having, trouble with white sticking or finding the adhesive, is actually going on your printer itself. And I can put this in text for you, or if you have a pen and pencil, you can write this down. You'll hit menu on your printer. You'll hit menu. You'll go to calibration. You'll select calibration, and then you'll go to color density. You'll click on color density, and then go to your white. And I always recommend bumping your white up to 2 or 3 on the printer itself, because if you think about it, we're taking away so much white here in the RIP that sometimes on your printer itself, we just have to add a little bit more white. So adding it on the printer is actually going to tell the toner and the drum to actually lay more down, and that's going to help you, especially with all white prints and small white text or detail in your print, to make sure that your adhesive sheet finds the white toner on your A sheet. So it's all in the printer itself. I would make that change. There's nothing you would have to change in the RIP software. Carrie said, did you say on a white tee you would turn off spot channel fill up? So that's a good question. And that's really going to depend on what paper you're using. So if you're using laser dark or laser light on a white t-shirt, it still needs the white, the little bit of white behind the lighter colors for the adhesive sheet to find your A film or your A sheet. So the lighter colors, the yellow and the light blue, they need the white for it to be a dense enough color for the adhesive or the B sheet to find that toner on the A sheet. So I do not recommend turning off your spot channel fill up when you're using those papers. Now there's other papers on the market that don't need the white, like laser transparent or even the Magic Touch T1 that doesn't necessarily need the white. But if you are using, like I said, the laser dark or laser light papers, those are still going to need the white for it to be a successful transfer. There you go. Kyle just posted in the chat, for you, Gerald, how to bump up the white on your printer itself. No, these are good questions. So that pretty much covers step 4. Like I said, with these settings you see here, that's going to be about 90 to 95% of your prints. You're going to be fine just using these settings right here. Before I move on to step 5, because that's going to be more in depth, is there any more questions on this step or anything previously that I said that you guys might have questions on? Carrie, good question. I say yes. On all the demo printers I have here, is that I always leave my white on, like I said, +2 or +3 for all my prints. I think it helps with yellows. I think it helps with a lot of the toner, having the toner find the adhesive. I think it helps with a lot of that problem. So yes, once you make that change, you won't have to keep going back and forth per design. Just let it be there, because it's not going to add white when you're not using it, so you don't got to worry about that. But it does, I think, help the transfers be more consistent and successful. Okay, let's go to step 5, and I feel like this is where a majority of the questions will come. So step 5, I'm going to use different images for step 5 and go through each one. So kind of just a general overlay of step 5. The biggest and most, a common question that I do get, I'm not saying any of you experience this, but you'll go to step 5, think you're doing great, you hit print and it doesn't print on the computer, or the printer doesn't print, and you're kind of wondering why. And it's making sure you have the right printer selected up here. So if you're using the 8432, making sure your printer selected here, I believe a lot of the times it'll just go towards your basic printer that's in your devices and printers. So just making sure you have your printer selected at the top when you hit print is going to be beneficial. You can always select how many copies you want. So it can be one. I wouldn't recommend putting more than 30 to 40 transfer sheets in there at a time. But you can select how many copies you want. You can select to mirror or not mirror your image. So if you're uploading images just straight forward or I guess right facing, then you will have to mirror your image in the RIP. But as you see on this image here, this one's already pre-mirrored or mirrored. So I'll just go ahead. You would turn that off. So you don't want to mirror it twice. But that's a good point, is that when you're saving your designs, you don't have to save them mirrored in your design software. You can do that here in the software itself. So screening. So this is where we can, the click of a button, halftone the image or rasterize it by putting little lines or holes, taking out backgrounds, removing colors. There's stuff here which I'll get into, and I'll hit these in depth here in a second. Print settings. So like I said at the beginning, when I selected my laser dark setting, the media type already automatically goes to user type 1 because that is Forever's preset profile for the Forever laser dark paper. With that being said, you can use your laser dark profile and then use laser light paper here by simply just choosing user type 2 or ultra heavy 3. So you can kind of use one profile for all your papers. It's just knowing what paper you're using and making sure your media type is, selected correctly. A lot of people, or some, mistake I hear is that maybe customers are going between a laser light paper and a laser dark. And when they're printing on their laser dark, they accidentally have the laser light media type on and their print comes out very spotty. This right here is telling the fuser what temperature to heat up. So obviously the film is going to be not as a hot temperature as a more thicker paper would be. So this is all this is doing right here on media type is what type of paper am I putting through the printer, and how hot does that fuser have to get. I don't really worry about this box right here, so I wouldn't even worry about it. Input tray. So here's a good thing. If you're just starting out, or you just want to make sure that you're printing correctly, on this input tray, I would start out with multi-purpose tray. And what that does is when you hit print, it's basically your oh no button. Is that if I hit print, it's going to make me go on the printer itself and hit the online button for it to print. When I say it's the oh no button, because if I hit print and I'm like, oh no, this isn't the setting I want to use, well, that gives you a chance to cancel the job before it prints on the printer, change your settings here, and then print again. If you just want to hit print, and if you want it to just print automatically, just changing it to automatic tray detection here, which means if I hit print, that sheet of paper is going to get printed on. So it's a way, the multi-purpose tray function is a way for you to maybe save paper when you're still getting used to the RIP software and not wasting the film because you did a misprint or something like that. But once like I said, you get used to the RIP software, go ahead and hit the automatic tray detection. That's when I hit print down here. It's going to go ahead and print. Offset right here. So it comes stock at 0. What I like to do is do -4 millimeters of an offset on the X. So, and I use this because of the laser dark paper. The B sheet, or the adhesive sheet, is just a little bit smaller than the A sheet is, in order for you to have somewhere to pinch when you do your marrying process. And having an offset of -4 millimeters, or you can do 0.25 inches, is that it just chokes your design in from the edges to make sure that, all your toner is in the, covered by the adhesive. So it's basically a way, to make sure that everything that you want to be printed is going to get covered with adhesive. So that's why I always set mine to -4, and I do millimeters, but like I said, you can do 0.25, or you can do inches. I don't touch the Y because the A and the B sheets are the exact same size up and down. But you definitely could do the same -4 offset Y, and all it does is it's just going to be, a 1/4 of an inch. It's going to just choke it down from the top. Your profiles down here. So Forever went in and actually made specific profiles for your printer. So if you're doing the 8432 laser dark, you can go ahead and select the laser dark profile down here. You're not going to be wrong doing the no ICC profile, but sometimes I've seen in the past that if you want more of a specific color, is printing in the profiles that Forever made for their papers is going to help you get that. And I see it a lot with oranges and the maroons and stuff like that. Is that printing through the profile that Forever made for your printer is going to help you achieve the colors that you're wanting on the printer itself. So I kind of went through the settings there real quickly. So I'm gonna, before I go in depth on the screening aspect of this, I'm gonna go ahead and go back into the questions. Let's see. I see Kyle's asking people. My online button doesn't flash like I've seen in videos. There's settings somewhere that does. Yeah, I would not worry about it flashing or not. It could be just a sensor, but as long as it's working, yeah, I would not worry about that as well. Okay, so when do we use the settings? You know, when to use a micro mask, recommended bright, recommended dark media, screening from printer. First and foremost, the one setting you won't use is use screening as configured. You do not need to use this setting. You're going to be using, in my mind, three main settings, which is use screening from printer. So we'll go from that one first. This is basically saying, however you see your image right here on step 3 is how it's going to print when you hit print on step 5 using use screening from printer. Basically, that's saying is that I'm not touching the image. I'm not going to half-tone rasterize it. I'm just going to print it as I see it. And on a design like this, where it's already distressed and there's a lot of open space, there's no need to additionally rasterize an image like this, especially when you're using text or, thinner designs, is that you're going to use that use screening from printer. Now let's get into, when are we going to use the other settings? So let's start with this image right here. So here's the image right here that, there's no breakup in the design. It's a solid design, pretty thick. And you're wondering, how would I put this on a red t-shirt or maybe even a gray t-shirt? Well, so now we're going to get into MicroMask. What MicroMask does is all right, let me go through the settings. Sorry if I'm getting a little off topic. So MicroMask is you're basically telling the image, I'm gonna rasterize this image regardless of the color. I'm not gonna attack dark colors or light colors. I'm going to rasterize the entire image. And what this mask is you can see you have options. Is how big of holes or lines do you want to put in your design? So the smaller the number, the larger the hole or the line is. And I have a picture to show that. Let's see if it pops up. It's still loading. So if you see here, this is a dot size of 10. So if I zoom in, you can see that these dots are really large. It's actually, in my mind, you're taking too much of the color out of the design. But on the same, what does 40 look like? If I was using a mask of 40, and if you see here, 40 is going to be a much smaller dot than the 10 is. And to be all honest, I always stay at 25. It's a very nice happy medium, and I'll show you what that looks like on a shirt. But basically your mask right here is how big of a hole or a line and the spacing between do I want to use. Like I said, my preference and my recommendation is to just stay at the 25 mask size. And now you can choose your shape. So Euclidean is going to be a dot, but and then you can do round as well. The only difference is round, they're all the exact same size. Euclidean is kind of, it's going to use the color more, and it's going to make it more look natural. So my recommendation is if you want holes in your design, to use Euclidean, and then you can use lines as well, which I know is the other very popular choice. And like I said, my personal preference is I either do Euclidean or lines, just depending on the design. There's really no one design that's going to look better than the other design. It's really just going to be your preference of which, shape you would rather use on that design. And then here you can use your angle. So 0 is going to be an up and down angle. So if you're using lines, it's going to be vertical lines. And then if you go down to 80 to 50, this is all going to be horizontal lines. And what I like to do is either use 5250 or 3750 and use a diagonal angle. It's going to look more natural to the eye. Highlights and shadows. So this is one thing that I do not touch ever. I think it takes out a lot of color. So if you increase your highlights, basically you're taking more of the light colors away. If you increase your shadows or decrease it, you're losing more darker color. So when it comes stock at 2 and 98, I've tried a lot of images and I've never had an issue or never needed to change my highlights or shadows. So my recommendation is just keep those at 2 and 98. And then the percentage of the mask. This is basically saying how much of the image do I want to put lines or holes in. So here's what 2% looks like of a micro mask with a 40 dot shape. So 2% of the image is covered in holes. And as you can see here, this is really not doing much to the design. These holes are too small that the adhesive is going to fill them up anyways. And it's really not, I guess, rasterizing or half-toning the design at all. And then here's what 20% looks like with lines, is that 20% of the image is going to be covered with lines. And this is going to, make a greater effect to your t-shirt. And let me throw up a picture here of me putting this on a light shirt. So this design right here was made with a 22%, it's actually the exact one we're looking at. This is a 22% mask percentage and a 25% mask with lines at a 5250 angle. And this is your end result. So obviously from a distance here, it looks really good, but if you do zoom in, you do see lines going through the entire image, no matter on the color. The only thing is that it's going to go through the text as well. Which gets me into my next point is that, what is this recommended for bright media function and how does that work? The recommended for bright media is basically, before I go into this, let me go see if we got some more questions here. So, okay, we do not. So bright media, this is basically instead of bright, think of white, and instead of dark, think of black. So this is taking out a white in your image and in the brighter colors. So if you see this t-shirt right here I did yesterday, here's 3 different shirts with 3 different settings. The far right is going to be your micro mask. The middle is going to be recommended for bright media with a tolerance of 100. And the last shirt on the left is going to be a tolerance of 300. So if you see with these 3 shirts is that the higher density you go up, or the tolerance, the more bright or light colors you're taking out of your design. And to give you guys a heads up, this is a feature that recommended for bright media that I do not personally use. And as you can see here, it just takes out too much of the color for me, where, it took out pretty much all of that yellow and the density of the greens and the reds and the oranges for me that, looks good on a shirt. And that's why I'm always going to recommend using that micro mask feature in the RIP to lighter or colored shirts when you do want to rasterize the image, because as you can see here, it's just taking out too much of the brighter colors it really does lose the vibrancy of that t-shirt. So that pretty much covers the bright. I mean, yes, it's a feature, but as you can see, just, the proof's in the pudding there that, you lose too much of your colors for it to, be sellable for you to give one of your customers. Yes, it will work, but it, obviously just comes out a little more faded than the micro mask will. So let's get to recommended dark media. Hold on, I see a question here. Can you specify which part of a design to rasterize? For example, I have a design that has both text and an image. I only want to rasterize the design, not the text. Is that possible? It's possible, but I would say people that are being more successful doing that are doing that in their design software, where they're half toning it in their design software and just uploading it in the RIP. Now, if you see here back to the picture, that recommended for bright media does not touch your darker colors. So if I zoomed in on this image, the text, or the black text especially, is not being touched. But as you can see here, where the darker color in the eye is not rasterized at all, as it rasterizes everything else. And for the same instance, which I'm about to hit on the dark media, is that when you use the dark media feature, your white is always going to be solid in your text, and it's going to half tone everything else. But I'm jumping a little bit ahead there. But so I guess there is a way to do it in the RIP, but I would say it's mostly going to be for the recommended dark media, and it's going to be with white text. But if not, it's like I said, doing it ahead of time in your design software is going to be the most successful way to do that. So let's get into recommended dark media. When do I use it? Stuff of that nature. So I recommend using the dark media is when you're going on, black shirts or dark gray t-shirts or stuff of that nature, is because it gets rid of the black of the design and uses the substrate come through. I think this is probably the greatest feature of this RIP because if you see here, I just want to show you a t-shirt visual before I get into it, is that especially these two down here, just to give you guys a pointer, this was a micro mask, this was dark media, and this was dark media with a different tolerance, which I'll go through. But it makes it look more natural rather than using the micro mask on the t-shirt for dark media. As you can see here, these are the same exact settings, steps 1 through 4. I just changed settings on 5. So when I bumped up the saturation on step 3 for this first one, the colors, they kind of look muted. And when you zoom in, using micro mask on a dark shirt and you're printing the dark colors does not make it look more natural on the t-shirt. It actually makes it look more faded out. And that's why using the dark feature is going to, help it look more realistic. And the difference between the last two designs is going to be in the shadow tolerance. So if I go back to the image, the middle one right here are these settings right here. So it's a line 5250, and this is a shadow tolerance of 100. And so if you see the dark media at 100 feature, this pig right here had a black background. So if you use 100 tolerance, you still see it's still printing some black, but it's getting rid of most of it, which you can get away with. This image here with Pirates of the Caribbean. But if you did want to get rid of all the black and just use the black t-shirt to come through for his t-shirt and stuff like that, your shadow tolerance on step 5 has to be at least 150 tolerance. Now with the last example, I just wanted to show you that the higher the number, the more colors it gets rid of. So if you see here on the bottom picture, is that it gets rid of a lot of the dark. So to me, it's taking away too much of the image for my liking, but maybe your customer really likes it. But I just really wanted to show the difference between 100 shadow tolerance and 300 shadow tolerance and the more dark colors that it does take out of the design. Like I said, your sweet spot is going to be anywhere from 200 to 150 if you still want to keep a lot of detail and get rid of the dark or the black completely. But if you do zoom in, as you can see, the white is still untouched, and that's true in the design as well. So it does help your white pop off the t-shirts when you are using this feature in the RIP. Yeah, like Kyle said, so what you can do if you have text and colors is in the RIP software, load in all your designs on, one sheet of paper or by itself, and half tone those, and then put all your text on a different sheet, and then, keep those solid. So that's definitely another way you can do that. And then you can just cut out the designs and press them on the t-shirt together. So that's definitely another way. That's a good point, Kyle. Would you still up the shadow tolerance on black tee if you remove black in step 3? So that's a good question. So sometimes customers, and I know Forever's made a video on this, especially with this David Beckham portrait, is that he Forever has done in the past where they will remove the black in step 3. And then they'll go to step 5 of the RIP, and they will print with a shadow tolerance of 100. So since we already removed the black, there's no need to do it again. And it still keeps, the light shadowing of the hair and stuff on the print when you do it. So there's 2 ways. My recommendation would just get a sample black t-shirt and try them both. I think it looks more natural if you just use it doing the shadow tolerance here. But I do know that there's customers that do it, this way is when they'll remove the color first and then they'll use the shadow tolerance in step 5. So like I said, my personal preference is doing it all here on this, at once. But, people do it different and have different preferences. But this is definitely still an option to answer your question, Carrie. And then let me, for the dark media, this is at 200. And if you zoom in here, as you can see, it did take away all the black from this image compared to the 100 shadow tolerance. Yeah, so that kind of covers all these settings here. I know this was kind of fast, so if you guys do have more questions, that kind of covers step 5. So what I am going to do real quick is unmute everybody and have an open discussion, with any questions you guys may have regarding the RIP or the Okies. So yeah, hey, how's everyone doing? Hope you guys learned something and I didn't go too fast. Just a side note, there in our Oki Data White Toner group, there is a Forever cheat sheet. So you can you go in there and it has steps 1 through 5 in writing. So it's something nice you can follow on your own. And that is, like I said, if you go into our white toner, if you go into the files, it's right here. The cheat sheet's there for you guys to go ahead and look at. So does anyone have any other questions while we're all on the phones? Cool. Well, if not, I'll hang around. But I appreciate your guys' time. Thanks for logging on. That kind of concludes the RIP software training. Hopefully you guys learned something and feel free to keep using the group for reference point. All right, Carrie. Just curious about printing onto labels or colored stock. Is it okay to do through the RIP, or should I just go through design software and print directly to printer? You can do it through the RIP. Definitely in step 4, make sure you turn off the white, or else it's going to put white behind your colors. So if you are just doing normal printing, I upload stuff all the time in the RIP. Just make sure to just turn off your white when you are printing normally. The cheat sheet, it's in our, if you're not in our group, it's in our Oki Data White Toner Club group, right here in the files. So you can, go up here, click on files, and then you can download that cheat sheet right here in our group. Is there a sheet that has a bit more info on the heavy/light papers? What do you mean by heavy/light papers, Sharon? Like, pros and cons, or? I'm trying to think. I don't know if there's like a math sheet that has like all the different medias on it. But if there's specific questions if you have regarding them, you can feel free to reach out to me, and I can definitely help. I just commented with my email. You can definitely email me, any questions you have, which papers I recommend for what, and I'd be happy to share all that information with you and put whatever I can on an email to send to you. No problem. Sweet. Well, thanks everyone. I'm gonna go ahead and end it. We got another one. All right, Carrie. Question about using the black toner 84. Do the steps stay the same? So that's a very good question, Carrie. What you're gonna need to do with the black toner is go on to, let's do this real quick, Forever's website. Here, you're going to go to support, downloads, color profiles, go to the 8432 and download this CMYK profile right here. And then in the RIP software, at the very beginning, you're going to select that profile for the black toner. And then it's not even going to give you an option for the white toner on step 4. So you can still halftone or rasterize images, but make sure to print through this driver so it knows you're using a CMYK printer and not a CMY white printer. Sweet. Well, thanks everyone for your time. I'm going to go ahead and end this, and then any other questions following, definitely reach out to the Facebook group. I'll be happy to help.